The ice storm hit Glacius 7 without warning. One moment the sky was clear and cold. The next moment, frozen wind screamed across the mining outpost like 1,000 angry voices. The temperature dropped so fast that metal cracked and shattered. Anyone caught outside had only minutes to find shelter before the cold would kill them. Greg Foster was securing equipment near the eastern hangar when he heard the evacuation alarm. He grabbed his thermal coat tighter and ran toward the nearest shelter. The wind pushed against him like a solid wall. Ice crystals cut his exposed face. He could barely see 3 feet ahead through the white chaos. Then he heard it. A small sound almost lost in the roaring storm. A cry. High-pitched and terrified. Greg stopped and turned his head, trying to locate the source. There it was again. Coming from behind a stack of supply containers near the landing pad. He changed direction and fought his way toward the sound. Every step was a battle against the wind that wanted to throw him down. Behind the containers, huddled against the metal, was a small figure. Greg dropped to his knees beside it. The creature was a child but not human. The skin was pale blue and smooth like polished stone. Large dark eyes stared up at him with pure terror. This was a Valorian child, maybe 6 or 7 years old by their size. The child's mouth was open in a silent scream. Tears ran down the small face, but something was wrong with the tears. They were freezing. Actual ice crystals formed on the child's cheeks where the tears touched skin. The child's lips were turning darker blue. The small body shook violently. Hey, it's okay, Greg said, reaching out slowly. I'm here to help. The child pulled back and pressed harder against the metal container. The large eyes filled with more fear. More frozen tears formed on the already icy cheeks. Greg knew about Valorians. They were a warrior species. Proud. Strong. Their entire culture was built on never showing weakness and never accepting help from outsiders. Even their children were taught these rules from birth. This child had probably been taught that accepting help from a stranger, especially a human, would bring shame to their entire family. But Greg also knew that Valorian bodies needed constant warmth. Their home world was a hot planet with 3 suns. In cold like this, a Valorian child would die in less than 10 minutes. Already the child's skin was changing color. The shaking was getting worse. I know you're scared, Greg said softly. He kept his hands visible and moved very slowly. I know your people have rules about help. But right now those rules don't matter. Right now you need warmth or you're going to die. Do you understand? The child stared at him. The small body continued to shake. More tears froze on the blue face. Greg made a decision. He unzipped his thermal coat and pulled it off. The cold hit him immediately like a physical blow. His own body started to shake. But he wrapped the coat around the small shivering form anyway. There, he said, pulling the coat tight around the child. That's better, right? The child tried to push the coat away with weak hands. No, the small voice said in broken English. Shame. My family cannot accept. Your family wants you alive, Greg said firmly. He kept the coat wrapped around the child despite the weak protests. Being alive is not shameful. Dying when someone could help you, that's the real shame. That wastes your life and hurts everyone who loves you. The child's eyes were starting to close. The cold was winning. Greg knew he had to do more. He scooped the small body into his arms, coat and all, and held the child against his chest. His own body heat would help. At least for a little while. I have a daughter, Greg said, starting to walk toward the shelter. The wind tried to knock him down, but he kept moving. Her name is Sophie. She's about your age. Back on Earth. That's my home planet. Do you know about Earth? The child's eyes flickered open slightly. Greg took that as a good sign. Keep talking. Keep the child conscious. Earth is very different from here, Greg continued, pushing forward step by step. We have warm places and cold places. Where I come from, we have winter. That's a cold season. Sophie loves winter. She likes to build snowmen. Do you know what those are? The child made a small sound. Maybe listening. Maybe just breathing. A snowman is a person made of snow, Greg explained. His own body was shaking badly now without his coat. His fingers were starting to hurt from the cold. You stack up 3 big balls of snow. Put stones for eyes. A carrot for a nose. It's silly. But it makes children happy. Sophie makes one every winter. They were halfway to the shelter now. Greg's legs felt heavy. The cold was reaching deep into his bones. But he kept walking. Kept talking. Sophie told me once that she wants to visit space stations and meet aliens, Greg said. His words came out in frozen puffs of air. I told her that aliens are just people from different places. Some look different. Some have different rules. But everyone wants the same basic things. To be safe, to be loved, to matter to someone. The child's eyes were fully open now, watching Greg's face as he talked. You matter, Greg said, looking down at the small blue face. You matter to your family. You matter to your people. And right now you matter to me. Because I see a child who needs help. And where I come from, we help children. Always. No exceptions. That's not weakness. That's the strongest thing humans do. A tear rolled down the child's face. But this time it didn't freeze. The coat was working. The child's body temperature was rising just enough. My name is Kesh, the child whispered. Kesh, Greg repeated, smiling despite his shaking body. That's a good strong name. My name is Greg. It's nice to meet you, Kesh. Even if the circumstances aren't great. The shelter entrance was visible now through the storm. Just 50 more feet. Greg's vision was getting blurry. His fingers and toes were numb. But he kept moving. When we get inside, Greg said, they'll have warm blankets. Hot drinks. Medical people to check you over. You're going to be okay, Kesh. I promise. Kesh looked up at Greg with those large dark eyes. Then the small hands reached out from inside the coat and grabbed onto Greg's shirt. Holding on. Thank you, Kesh whispered. Greg felt something warm in his chest despite the cold trying to freeze him solid. You're welcome, kid. They reached the shelter door. Greg pounded on it with his frozen fist. The door opened and warm air rushed out. Someone shouted for medical help. Hands reached out to take Kesh. The child first, Greg said, passing the small bundled form to the medics. Valorian. Hypothermia. Needs heat immediately. Then Greg stumbled inside and let the door close behind him, shutting out the screaming storm. Kesh was safe. That was all that mattered. Greg collapsed against the wall and let his own body finally rest. The warm air inside the first shelter lasted only seconds. A loud crack echoed through the building. Someone screamed. The walls shook violently. Everyone out, a security officer yelled. The structure is failing. Move to shelter Gamma now. Greg looked at the medic who was checking Kesh. The woman's face was pale with fear. We can't stay here, she said. The support beams are breaking from the cold. This whole building could collapse. Where is shelter Gamma? Greg asked, already knowing he wouldn't like the answer. 2 kilometers north, the medic said. But in this storm, it might as well be on another planet. People were rushing past them toward the emergency exit. Greg looked down at Kesh, who was wrapped in a thermal blanket now. The child's color was better but still not good. Those large dark eyes stared up at Greg with trust that made his chest hurt. Can you walk? Greg asked Kesh. The child tried to stand but legs gave out immediately. Too weak. Too cold for too long. I've got you, Greg said, scooping Kesh up again. The medic draped the thermal blanket over both of them, but Greg knew it wouldn't be enough. Not for 2 kilometers in that storm. They stepped back outside into the screaming wind. The group of survivors stayed close together, following the guide ropes that connected the shelters. But the wind was stronger now. Visibility was 0. Greg could barely see the person in front of him. His hands holding Kesh were already going numb. Without his coat, which was still wrapped around Kesh under the blanket, the cold cut through his uniform like it was made of paper. Each breath hurt his lungs. Ice formed on his eyebrows and beard. The group moved slowly. Too slowly. Greg's fingers started to hurt badly. Then the pain changed to something worse. A burning sensation that spread through his hands. He knew what that meant. Frostbite was setting in. Greg. Kesh's small voice came from inside the blanket. Your hands are shaking very much. I'm okay, Greg lied. His words came out slurred. His jaw was too cold to work properly. They had walked maybe half a kilometer when someone ahead fell. Then another person. The cold was winning. People's bodies were shutting down. The group started to break apart as the stronger ones pushed ahead and the weaker ones fell behind. Greg's legs felt like stone. Each step took all his concentration. His hands were turning dark. He could see it even through the blowing snow. Dark purple spreading to black. His fingers wouldn't bend anymore. He could barely feel Kesh in his arms. We need to stop, Kesh said suddenly. You are dying. Can't stop, Greg forced out. Keep moving or we freeze. But his body had other ideas. His legs gave out and he fell to his knees. He managed to keep Kesh held against his chest, but he couldn't stand back up. His frozen legs wouldn't respond. No, Kesh said, struggling in the blanket. Get up. Please get up. Greg tried. He really tried. But his body was done. The cold had won. His vision was going dark at the edges. This was how it ended. In a storm on a planet far from home. Then small blue hands grabbed his face. Kesh's face was close to his, those dark eyes fierce with determination. You saved me, Kesh said. Now I save you. My people are warriors. We do not leave anyone behind. The child pulled and tugged until Greg managed to crawl forward. Just a few feet. Then a few more. Kesh spotted something ahead. A small equipment shed half buried in snow. There, Kesh pointed. We hide there. Greg used his last strength to crawl to the shed. He fell against the door and it broke open. They tumbled inside. It was only slightly less cold than outside, but the wind stopped screaming at them. That alone felt like a miracle. Greg collapsed on the floor. He couldn't feel his hands at all now. Couldn't feel his feet. His whole body shook so violently that his teeth rattled. This was severe hypothermia. He had maybe minutes left. Kesh pulled the thermal blanket off and spread it over Greg. Then the child did something that went against every rule of Valorian culture. Kesh climbed under the blanket and pressed close to Greg, sharing body heat. This is shameful for my people, Kesh whispered. But you taught me something. Being alive is not shameful. You're my friend. Friends help each other. Greg wanted to answer but couldn't make his mouth work. He felt Kesh's warmth against him. It helped. A little. But not enough. Kesh looked around the small shed. Greg's frozen eyes followed the child's gaze. There were supplies here. Emergency equipment. Kesh crawled across the shed and pulled down a box. Inside were emergency flares. The child had watched the human workers use these before. Kesh pulled one out and read the simple words printed on the side. Pull tab to ignite. Small blue fingers gripped the tab and pulled hard. The flare burst to life with red bright light and blessed heat. Kesh placed it carefully on the metal floor away from anything that could burn. Then the child lit 2 more flares. The small shed filled with warm red light and heat. Greg felt the warmth slowly reaching him. His shaking got worse before it got better. That was normal with hypothermia. His body was trying to warm up too fast. It hurt. Everything hurt. But he was alive. Tell me more stories, Kesh said, settling back under the blanket next to Greg. About humans. About Earth. About your daughter. Greg's mouth finally started working again. What do you want to know? His voice was rough and broken. You said humans are strong, Kesh said. How are you strong? You have no thick skin. No claws. No armor. The cold hurts you so much. How do you survive? Greg managed a small smile. We survive because we don't give up, he said slowly. Humans lived on Earth for thousands of years before we had technology. We survived ice ages. Droughts. Predators. We survived because we helped each other. We worked together. We refused to quit even when everything said we should. He paused to catch his breath. His hands were still black but feeling was starting to return. The pain was incredible. There was a human once, Greg continued, trying to focus on anything but the pain. Her name was Shackleton. Now wait. His name was Shackleton. He led an expedition to the coldest place on Earth. Antarctica. A land of ice and snow like this place but worse. His ship got trapped in ice and crushed. He and his men were stranded for months in the freezing cold. Did they die? Kesh asked quietly. No, Greg said. Shackleton led all of them to safety. Every single person survived. Because he refused to give up. Because humans have something special inside us. We call it endurance. It means we keep going even when everything says to stop. We survive because we choose to survive. Kesh was quiet for a moment. You are like Shackleton, the child finally said. You kept going when you should have stopped. For me. For you, Greg agreed. Because you matter. The flares burned bright and warm. Outside the storm continued to rage. But inside the small shed, a human and an alien child waited together for rescue, kept alive by emergency flares and human stubbornness. Greg's hands were damaged, maybe permanently. But they were both breathing. Both alive. That was enough. The flares burned for 30 minutes. Then one by one they started to die. The red light faded. The warmth disappeared. The cold came rushing back like a hungry animal. Greg tried to move but his body wouldn't obey. His arms and legs felt disconnected from his brain. He could think the commands but nothing happened. His fingers were completely black now. He couldn't feel them at all. His toes were the same. The shaking had stopped, which was actually worse. When the shaking stopped, it meant the body was giving up. Greg. Kesh's voice sounded far away even though the child was right next to him. Greg, wake up. Stay awake. Greg's eyes were closing. He felt so tired. More tired than he had ever been in his life. Sleep seemed like the best idea. Just rest for a minute. Just close his eyes. Kesh shook him hard. No. You told me about Shackleton. About human endurance. You cannot give up now. You are not allowed to give up. Greg forced his eyes open. Kesh's blue face was very close. Those large dark eyes were filled with tears. But these tears weren't freezing. The child was warm enough now. Safe enough. That made Greg happy. You should go, Greg whispered. His lips barely moved. Find help. Save yourself. No, Kesh said firmly. The child's small jaw was set with determination. You did not leave me. I do not leave you. Kesh, listen, Greg tried again. You can make it. You're young. Strong. The storm is not as bad now. Follow the guide ropes. Find shelter Gamma. Tell them where I am. They can send help. It was true. The wind outside had decreased. The worst of the storm was passing. Kesh could probably survive the journey now. Alone, the child could move faster. Could get help in time. Kesh stared at Greg for a long moment. The child's face showed a struggle. Greg could see it. The Valorian culture said to be strong. To be independent. To not burden others. Running for help would be the smart choice. The logical choice. But Kesh had learned something new in the past hour. Something that went against everything the child had been taught. My people say that warriors must be strong alone, Kesh said slowly. But you showed me different. You showed me that real strength is helping others. Real strength is refusing to leave someone behind, even when it costs you everything. The child grabbed Greg's hands. The black frozen hands that couldn't feel anything. Kesh pressed them against the child's own chest, against the warmth there. This will hurt me, Kesh said. My people's body heat is very high. Your frozen skin touching me feels like touching fire. It burns. But I do not care. You burned for me. Now I burn for you. Greg felt a tiny bit of warmth seeping into his dead hands. It was working. Slowly. So slowly. But it was working. The problem was that it hurt Kesh. He could see the child's face tighten with pain. Could hear the small gasps. Stop, Greg said. You're hurting yourself. Yes, Kesh agreed. But you hurt yourself for me. This is what friends do. This is what you taught me. The warmth continued to spread. Greg's fingers began to tingle. The tingling turned to burning. The burning turned to agony. He wanted to scream but didn't have the breath. The pain meant his hands were coming back to life. The pain meant he might survive. Minutes passed. Long painful minutes. Kesh never let go. Never stopped despite the pain it caused. The child's face showed the cost. Kesh's chest was turning darker blue where Greg's frozen hands pressed. The high Valorian body heat was being pulled away by Greg's frozen flesh. Finally, Greg felt his fingers move. Just a tiny movement. But it was something. He could control them again. Barely. Okay, he said. Okay, that's enough. You did it. Kesh released his hands and fell back, breathing hard. The child's chest showed marks where Greg's hands had been. Burn marks in reverse. Frost burns on blue skin. Now we go together, Kesh said, standing on shaky legs. You can move now. We can make it if we help each other. Greg wanted to argue. Wanted to tell Kesh to run ahead. But he looked at the child's determined face and knew it would be useless. Kesh had made a choice. Had chosen to stay. Had chosen friendship over cultural rules. Together, Greg agreed. They wrapped the thermal blanket around both of them. Greg managed to stand by holding onto the wall. His legs worked now. Barely. Everything hurt. Everything screamed at him to stop. But Kesh was right. If they helped each other, they might make it. They stepped back out into the storm. It was less violent now but still deadly. The wind pushed at them but didn't knock them down. The snow was falling instead of flying. They could see maybe 10 feet ahead. Kesh spotted the guide rope half buried in snow. The child dug it out and grabbed it with small hands. Hold on to me, Kesh said. I follow the rope. You follow me. They moved forward step by painful step. When Greg stumbled, Kesh's small body braced him. When Kesh slipped on ice, Greg's damaged hands caught the child. They were a team now. Two beings from different worlds working together to survive. Tell me more about your daughter, Kesh said as they walked. Sophie. What is she like? Greg understood what Kesh was doing. Keeping him talking. Keeping him conscious. Keeping him focused on something other than the pain and cold. Sophie is brave, Greg said, his words coming easier now. She's not afraid of anything. When she was 4, she saw a spider in her room. A big one. Most kids would scream. Sophie picked it up and carried it outside. Said the spider was just lost and needed help finding home. Kesh smiled despite the cold. She is like you. Maybe, Greg said. Or maybe I'm like her. She teaches me things all the time. About being kind. About helping others. About not judging people who look different. They kept walking. The guide rope led them forward through the white world. Greg's vision blurred, but he focused on the small blue figure ahead of him. Focused on not letting go. Focused on taking the next step. When I get home, Greg continued, I'm going to tell Sophie about you. About a brave Valorian child who broke all the rules to save a friend. She'll love that story. When you get home, Kesh repeated. Not if. When. When, Greg agreed firmly. Because we're going to make it. Both of us. Together. Through the snow ahead, a light appeared. Faint at first, then stronger. The emergency beacon of Shelter Gamma. They had found it. They were going to survive. Greg felt tears on his frozen face. They didn't freeze. He was warm enough now. They both were. Because they had chosen each other. Had chosen friendship over fear. Had chosen to face the storm together rather than alone. There, Kesh pointed. We made it. We made it, Greg echoed. And together, holding on to each other, they walked toward the light. The doors of Shelter Gamma opened before they even reached them. Someone had spotted them through the cameras. Medical teams rushed out with stretchers and equipment. Warm hands grabbed Greg and Kesh, pulling them inside to safety. The warmth hit Greg like a physical force. His body didn't know how to process it. He collapsed as soon as they got him through the door. The last thing he saw was Kesh's face looking down at him with worry. Then everything went dark. When Greg woke up, he was in a medical bay. White walls. Bright lights. The smell of antiseptic. His body was wrapped in heated blankets. And 4 drip fed into his arm. He tried to move his hands and felt something wrong. His left hand felt normal. His right hand felt too light. Greg lifted his right hand and stared at it. 2 fingers were missing. The ring finger and the little finger. Gone. Bandages covered the stumps. He had lost them to frostbite. The tissue had died and the doctors had removed them. You're awake, a nurse said, coming over quickly. She was human, middle-aged with kind eyes. How do you feel? Like I fought a storm and lost, Greg said. His voice was rough. The nurse smiled. You fought a storm and won. You're alive. So is the Valorian child. You saved that kid's life. Kesh, Greg said. The child's name is Kesh. Where is Kesh? With their family, the nurse said. They arrived 2 hours ago from one of the other shelters. The child refused to leave your bedside until the parents came. Sat right there in that chair, holding your good hand, telling anyone who would listen about the brave human who saved them. Greg felt warmth in his chest that had nothing to do with the heated blankets. Kesh was safe. That was all that mattered. 2 fingers seemed like a small price to pay. The door to the medical bay opened and several Valorians entered. They were tall, over 7 feet, with blue skin and muscular builds. They wore armor even here in the shelter. Warriors. Their faces showed no emotion. The largest Valorian stepped forward. This one wore more decorations on the armor. A commander. The eyes were hard and cold as they looked at Greg. I am Commander Drask, the Valorian said in perfect English. Parent to Kesh. I am told you endangered yourself for my child. Greg slowly sat up in the bed. He met the commander's gaze. I helped a child who needed help. That's all. That's all? Drask's voice rose. You nearly died. You lost parts of your body. For a Valorian child you did not know. This is not acceptable. Greg frowned. What's not acceptable is leaving a child to freeze to death. My child would have survived, Drask said firmly. Valorians are strong. We endure. We do not need humans to save us like we are weak and helpless. You have insulted my family. You have insulted my people. The other Valorians behind Drask nodded in agreement. Their faces showed anger. Greg couldn't believe what he was hearing. He had saved this being's child and was being yelled at for it. Your child was dying, Greg said, his own voice getting harder. I saw the frozen tears. I saw the skin changing color. Kesh had maybe 5 minutes left. Maybe less. Strong or not, your child needed help. And that is the shame, Drask said. That my child was in a position to need help from an outsider. That my child accepted help instead of facing death with honor. You have made my family look weak. Made Valorian culture look weak. As if we cannot take care of our own. Greg stared at the commander. At the angry warriors behind them. He thought about everything he had been through in the past day. The cold. The pain. The fear. The loss of his fingers. He had done all of that to save a child's life. And this was the response. Anger. Accusations of insult. Something hot and sharp filled Greg's chest. Not quite anger. Something else. Disappointment maybe. Or sadness at how wrong this was. Then I guess I insulted you, Greg said quietly. I'm not sorry. I do it again. Every time. Because in my culture, children matter more than pride. Life matters more than honor. If that makes me weak in your eyes, I'll accept that judgment. The door opened again and a small blue figure rushed in. Kesh. The child ran straight to Greg's bedside and grabbed his good hand with both small hands. Stop, Kesh said loudly, looking at Drask. Parent, you are wrong. You are all wrong. Drask's face showed shock. Kesh, you will not speak to me this way. You will not defend this human's actions. I will, Kesh said, standing straighter. The small body was shaking but the voice was firm. Because you were not there. You did not see what I saw. You did not feel what I felt. The child turned to face all the Valorians in the room. Drew a deep breath. When Kesh spoke again, it was in the Valorian language. Greg couldn't understand the words, but he heard the emotion. Heard the passion. Kesh spoke for several minutes. The child's voice rose and fell. Sometimes angry. Sometimes sad. Sometimes pleading. The Valorians listened. Their faces began to change. The anger faded. Something else took its place. Confusion maybe. Or thought. Finally Kesh finished and switched back to English, still looking at the gathered Valorians. All my life you taught me that accepting help is weakness, Kesh said. That asking for aid brings shame. That true warriors stand alone. But Greg showed me something different. He showed me that real strength is not refusing help. Real strength is giving help even when it costs you everything. The child held up Greg's damaged hand with the missing fingers. He lost parts of himself for me, Kesh continued. He gave his warmth when he had none to spare. He gave his strength when he had nothing left. He gave and gave and gave and expected nothing back. That is not weakness. That is the strongest thing I have ever seen. Tears ran down Kesh's blue face. Not frozen tears this time. Warm tears. Free tears. Greg did not make our culture look weak, Kesh said. He showed us what we have become. We are so afraid of looking weak that we would rather die than accept a hand offered in friendship. We are so proud that we cannot see kindness when it is given freely. That is not strength. That is foolishness. The room was completely silent. Even Drask stood frozen, staring at the small child. I almost died because I was too proud to accept help, Kesh said. I was ready to freeze alone rather than bring shame to my family. But Greg did not care about our rules. He cared about me. About my life. About saving someone who needed saving. If that brings shame to our family, then I am proud to carry that shame. Kesh turned back to Greg and squeezed his good hand. Thank you, the child said softly. Thank you for teaching me that being alive is better than being proud. Thank you for showing me what real strength looks like. Greg felt his own eyes getting wet. He squeezed Kesh's hand back with his good fingers. You're welcome, kid. 3 weeks passed slowly on Glacius 7. The ice storm finally ended after 5 days of continuous assault. The outpost began repairs. Life returned to normal. Or as normal as life could be on a frozen mining planet at the edge of known space. Greg spent most of those 3 weeks in the medical bay. His body healed from the hypothermia. His missing fingers stopped hurting so much. The doctors fitted him with a prosthetic attachment that worked almost as well as real fingers. Almost. He would never play guitar again. Never feel his daughter's hand the same way. But he was alive. That counted for something. Kesh visited him every single day. Sometimes twice a day. The child would sit in the chair beside Greg's bed and they would talk. Kesh taught Greg words in the Valorian language. Greg taught Kesh more English. They talked about their home worlds. Their families. Their lives. Sophie sent me a message yesterday, Greg said one afternoon, showing Kesh his data pad. On the screen was a video of a young girl with dark hair and a huge smile. She made another snowman. Look, she gave it a scarf and a hat this time. Kesh leaned close to watch the video. She looks like you. Same eyes. She has her mother's smile though, Greg said softly. That's the best part of her. Will you see her soon? Kesh asked. My contract here ends in 4 months, Greg said. Then I go home to Earth. 6 months of travel. But I'll get there. I'll hold her again. Kesh was quiet for a moment. I will miss you when you leave. I'll miss you too, kid, Greg said, ruffling the child's smooth blue hair. But we can send messages. Videos. We'll stay friends even across the galaxy. The door to the medical bay opened. Commander Drask entered, but this time the commander was not alone. Behind Drask came at least 20 other Valorians, all in formal armor, all carrying something. Greg sat up straighter in his bed. Commander, this is a lot of people. Drask approached the bed and stood very straight. The commander's face was serious but not angry like before. Greg Foster, human worker, friend to my child. The Valorian Council has asked me to deliver a message. The other Valorians formed 2 lines on either side of Drask. They moved with military precision. This was some kind of ceremony. Greg had no idea what was happening. 3 weeks ago you saved the life of a Valorian child, Drask continued. You did this at great cost to yourself. You sacrificed your body, your safety, your future. All for a child of another species. A child you did not know. Drask paused and looked at the gathered Valorians. Then back at Greg. My child spoke truth that day, Drask said. Truth that cut through centuries of Valorian culture and pride. We have been teaching our young that accepting help is weakness. That standing alone is strength. That asking for aid brings shame. We were wrong. The commander pulled something from beneath the armor. It was a crystal. Not large. Maybe the size of Greg's fist. But it caught the light in amazing ways. Blues and purples and whites swirled inside it like frozen fire. This is the crystal of valor, Drask said, holding it up for all to see. It is our highest honor. Given only to warriors who show courage beyond measure. Sacrifice beyond reason. Strength beyond limits. In our entire history, it has been given only to Valorians. Until today. Drask stepped forward and placed the crystal in Greg's good hand. Greg Foster, the Valorian Council awards you the Crystal of Valor, Drask said formally. You are the first outsider to receive this honor. You earned it with your actions. With your compassion. With your refusal to let a child die even when it meant your own suffering. We honor you. All 20 Valorians behind Drask placed their fists over their hearts and bowed. It was a Valorian salute. A sign of deep respect. Greg stared at the crystal in his hand. It was warm to the touch. Almost alive. He looked up at Drask with confusion in his eyes. I don't understand, Greg said. I just did what anyone would do. What any decent person would do. That's not special. That's just basic humanity. Exactly, Drask said, and for the first time Greg saw the commander smile. That is exactly why this matters. You say, what anyone would do, but that is not true. Most beings would not risk their lives for a stranger. Most would choose their own safety over a child they did not know. But you did not hesitate. You acted on compassion instinctively. This is a strength humans have that we Valorians lost long ago. Another Valorian stepped forward. This one was older, with scars across the blue face. I am Elder Thane, the Valorian said. I have lived 140 years. I've seen many brave warriors. But I have never seen courage like yours. Courage without thought of glory. Sacrifice without expectation of reward. You gave everything and asked for nothing. That is wisdom we must relearn. Kesh appeared from behind the Valorians and climbed up onto Greg's bed. The child sat close beside him, looking at the crystal. My people are changing, Kesh said quietly. Because of you. Because of what you taught us. We are learning that asking for help is not weakness. That accepting kindness is not shame. That working together makes us stronger than standing alone. Tears ran down Kesh's face as the child spoke. But these tears were different from the frozen tears in the storm. These were warm. Free. Full of gratitude instead of fear. You showed us that real strength is caring for others, Kesh continued. Real courage is being kind when it costs you something. Real honor is saving a life because it is the right thing to do. Greg felt his own eyes getting wet. He looked at the crystal in his hand. At the gathered Valorians. At Kesh beside him. At Commander Drask, who had gone from anger to understanding. I lost 2 fingers, Greg said, holding up his damaged hand. But I gained a friend. I'd make that trade any day. And we gained understanding, Drask said. Your 2 fingers taught an entire species that we had been wrong about strength. That is a gift beyond measure. The commander placed a hand on Greg's shoulder. When you return to Earth, take the crystal with you. Tell your people about us. Tell them that the Valorians learned wisdom from a human who refused to let a child freeze. Tell them that sometimes the smallest act of kindness can change an entire culture. Greg nodded, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. Over the next hour, each Valorian came forward to thank Greg personally. They spoke of how his actions had sparked debate throughout Valorian society. How their leaders were reconsidering old traditions. How their children were being taught new lessons about cooperation and compassion. When the ceremony finally ended and the Valorians left, Only Kesh remained. The child curled up beside Greg on the medical bed, careful of his healing body. Will you really tell people about me? Kesh asked. On Earth. Every person I meet, Greg promised. I'll tell them about the brave Valorian child who broke all the rules to save a friend. Who taught their entire species about real strength. Sophie especially will love your story. Kesh smiled and wiped away the last tears. And I will tell everyone here about the human who gave his warmth to a stranger. Who lost pieces of himself to save someone he did not know. Who showed us that the warmest thing in the universe is not fire or sun, but the human heart. Outside the medical bay window, the sun finally broke through the clouds of Glacius 7. Light poured across the frozen landscape, making the ice sparkle like millions of tiny crystals. The storm was over. The cold was still there, but somehow it felt less threatening now. Greg held the crystal of valor up to the light and watched the colors dance inside it. Blue like Valorian skin. Red like human blood. Purple like the space between stars. All mixed together. All beautiful. Two species from different worlds. Connected by one choice made in a storm. Connected by the simple truth that caring for others is never weakness. That compassion is the strongest force in the universe. That sometimes the bravest thing you can do is extend your hand to someone in need, even when it costs you everything. Kesh fell asleep against Greg's side, tears dried on the small blue face. But they were good tears now. Grateful tears. Warm tears that would never freeze again. And Greg smiled, holding the crystal close, knowing that somewhere far away his daughter Sophie would be proud of him. Knowing that this frozen planet had taught him something valuable. That warmth does not come from technology or fire or thermal coats. Warmth comes from the choice to care. From the refusal to look away. From the simple human truth that we are all responsible for each other, no matter how different we look or where we come from. The ice storm had passed. But its lesson would remain forever.